because there's no way that any traitor or spy or terrorist could get into the US Congress or the Senate, because you have a government agency specifically designed to stop that happening. That is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Do you feel better now? Are you relieved now? Well, once you would have been, folks, because once the FBI did a fine job. No longer. Now it's working for the other side. See, but the FBI has another problem. They are answerable to the Judiciary Committee, the most powerful committee in your Congress. Now, does anybody remember a congressman called John Conyers from Michigan? He was in Congress for about 140 years, I believe, in total. He was 63 to 2017. See, I did Common Core math, so it's a little bit off, you know. But he was there a long time. John Conyers was chairman of the Judiciary Committee for about 40 years. He oversaw the Justice Department and the FBI. John Conyers had a 50-year history with the Communist Party USA. He was a founder member of Democratic Socialists of America, a Marxist organization. He was also supporting the Workers' World Party, which supports North Korea and Cuba and Iran. They are the people ripping down Confederate statues around the southern states. And he was a big-time supporter of several Muslim Brotherhood front groups. The Muslim Brotherhood is the father of Hamas, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS. But in America, it works legally through the Council on American Islamic Relations, Muslim Student Association, etc. With some of your congressmen, and you can see John Conyers in his own words, when some of your congressmen tried to get the Muslim Brotherhood designated as a terrorist organization in this country, Conyers says, no, we can't do that. They're a peaceful social service agency now. We should work with them, not against them. We can't go after them. John Conyers has been worked with the enemies of America for more than 50 years. Another example, also in my movie, Andre Carson from Indiana, one of your 3 Muslim members of Congress. I've got him on tape. He's a big-time supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood. In his own words, he says he was at a Muslim Brotherhood front group in Connecticut in 2012. He said, people, I've been told there's some people spying on us here today. We've got some infiltrators in our audience checking us out because they believe we are here plotting to destroy this country. Well, I say to you, undercover operatives, Allah will not allow you to stop us. This man currently serves on the Intelligence Committee, overseeing the CIA, the FBI, all of them, 16 agencies. But let's go back to the Judiciary Committee. See, on that committee till recently, you had Judy Chu from California, San Gabriel Valley. Big-time supporter of the Communist Workers' Party. Militant pro-Chinese communists. And you should see Judy Chu attack the FBI, because every now and then the FBI tries to look like it's doing something. So it will arrest one of the more than 25,000 Chinese spies currently working in the country. That's too much for Judy Chu. She gets on their case. You can see her on C-SPAN. You are racist, she says. The FBI is a racist organization. You're only persecuting these people because you hate Asians. And she's even arranged for sensitivity training for these cruel FBI agents so they don't persecute these Chinese spies any longer. Now, the current head of the Judiciary Committee, you've seen him on TV, he takes up most of the screen, a man called Jerry Nadler from New York. Okay? Now, guess what? John Conyers was a member of Democratic Socialists of America, a Marxist group. This is Lenin. What Lenin said in a revolution, it's not taking power that's important, it's the keeping of power that's important. So they had one of their men controlling the Judiciary Committee, so then the next one to take it over was also a member of Democratic Socialists of America, a Marxist. 2 Marxists in a row have controlled your Judiciary Committee. So imagine this. This is a hypothetical situation. One day, the FBI wakes up, decides we better do our job while we still have a country. We've been remiss. We've got at least 100 members of Congress and 25 members of the US Senate who couldn't pass a background check to drive a school bus in Volusia County. They're working with the Iranians, the Cubans, the Chinese. They're working with the Communist Party USA, Democratic Socialists of America, Workers' World Party. They're destroying the country. They are the reason we have a nuclear deal with Iran. They are the reason we have Obamacare forced down our throat. They are the reason our borders are wide open and our kids are being indoctrinated in schools. They are the reason our military is being destroyed while Russia and China are building up for war. All of this is happening on our watch. We better do something darn quick. Let's go to the Judiciary Committee. Let's talk to our bosses. Mrs. Chu, Mr. Nadler, we need to investigate at least 100 of your Democratic colleagues for working against this country. Do you mind? And by the way, Mrs. Chu, by the way, Mr. Nadler, you're both on the list. Is that all right? What do you think's going to happen to their budget next year, folks? Do you think the FBI is stupid enough to bite the hand that feeds it? Why didn't they go after Hillary Clinton for her service? Because if any of you who had security clearances had done what Hillary Clinton done, you would never see daylight again. You'd be away for life in Leavenworth, where you deserve to be. But they couldn't do that to Hillary because Hillary could be the president. She could destroy the FBI. This is why the FBI doesn't go after communists anymore. Because when you go after communists, you always find Democrats, and that's very, very embarrassing. Very embarrassing. You know, so this is why we're in the situation we are. You know, every day, young, brave men and women from this country go overseas and fight horrible foreign enemies with great bravery and efficiency. And every day they are betrayed by domestic enemies in your own Congress who do everything they possibly can to sabotage their efforts. Everything they possibly can. That's why the debacle in Afghanistan. That's why the debacle in Iraq. That's why we couldn't win the Vietnam War. Could hardly win the Korean War. Still isn't resolved. Because every time American troops could have gone on there and cleaned it up in a very short space of time, and never were they allowed to do it. Because you have traitors, some Republicans too, traitors in your own Congress, and have had for a very long time. The FBI has not gone after congressmen for political offences since at least World War II. And I repeat my claim, there's at least 100 members of your House and 25 members of the US Senate who couldn't pass a background check to sell you stamps at the post office. But they run every major committee in your Congress and your Senate right now. Every single one. Intelligence, Homeland Security, all of them. But it's a bit of good news. At least we do have a moderate Democrat in the White House now. Well, that's what the Washington Post says. And the New York Times, they say Joe Biden's a good old-fashioned moderate Democrat, you know, like Harry Truman or JFK, you know. I'm going to tell you a story about Uncle Joe. Right, Uncle Joe Biden was a 29-year-old city councillor in Wilmington, Delaware in 1972. That was a Republican state. It never elected a Democrat statewide at that point. But he went up against a 4-term Republican incumbent for the US Senate. With a man with an 80% approval rating. Hal Boggs, I think his name was. He went up against this man and he won. So how did he win? He had the backing of an organisation called the Council for a Livable World. Go and Google their website tonight. It's still very active. The Council for a Livable World had a president at the time, and he picked out young Joe Biden, thought he was a very progressive young man. He got him about $90,000 and endorsements from all over the country and volunteers from all over the country. He got him elected. That man, his name, he was a former senator from Tennessee. His name was Albert Gore Sr. Some of you may have heard of his son. He invented the internet and global warming. That man, you know. And thank you, Florida, for saving us from that retard back in 2000. So anyway, so Joe Biden got picked out. Now, the council, and it just turns out that Albert Gore Sr. was a protege of a man called Armand Hammer. Some of you may have heard of him. He was the leading American Soviet agent of the early 20th century. He was a head of our Occidental Petroleum. He kept the Bolshevik Revolution alive in the early days, in the 20s and the 30s. And he protected, Al Gore Sr. protected Armand Hammer because the FBI was always going after him. They had a 1,000-page file on him, but Albert Gore Sr. would keep the FBI off his back, and in exchange, Armand Hammer made Al Gore Sr. a very, very rich man. Very rich man. So the Council for a Livable World was actually set up by a man called Leo Szilard, S-Z-I-L-A-R-D, Hungarian. And he was a supporter of the communist revolution in Hungary just after World War I. When that failed, he fled to Germany, then the United States. He became a nuclear physicist, a very good one. He was one of the top men in the Manhattan Project, the project that built your atomic weapon in World War II. And Leslie Groves, the head of that, always wanted to fire Szilard because he knew he was a communist, but he couldn't because he was too darn valuable and they had to beat Japan. There was dozens of communists in there. That's how the Soviets got the bomb so quick. Well, anyway, after the war, Leo Szilard became a peace activist, an international disarmament activist. He held the famous pipe wash conferences in Europe and in Canada, all around the Western world. Scientists and poets and, politicians from all over the world, all about disarmament, Not Soviet disarmament, American disarmament, okay? Now, in 1962, Szilard sets up the Council for a Livable World. It was a PAC, still is. They've elected way over 200 senators now and 300 congressmen. And the idea was this. They started out going to very small states like New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Maine, South Dakota, because you could elect a senator in those states for very little money. And as the senators negotiate treaties, you got a lot of bang for your buck on the international stage. So they did this, and this is what this was the deal. We will elect you. We will give you money. We will give you staff and policy directions. We will write papers for you. We will guide you when you're serving on Senate committees. We will help to get you re-elected. All you have to do is work every day to destroy the United States military. That's your job. And they did. Now, Joe Biden was one of their first recruits. And I have, again, in the movie, right there, in Joe's own words, at the 50th anniversary of the Council for a Livable World, thank you, Council. You were there with me right from the start. You guided me when I was chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And by the way, when he was in the US Senate and Reagan was trying to stop communism in Latin America, he was Reagan's worst enemy. The two that were just about as bad were Ted Kennedy, no surprise, and John Kerry, who I call Jane Fonda with less testosterone. So he was in there. Biden was bad. He was left-wing on foreign policy. He'd be moderate in domestic policy because he was in a Republican state. But on foreign policy, he was hard left. And then he goes on to say, you were there with me when I was on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, the chairman of it. You helped Obama and I negotiate the START treaty with Russia. The treaty that was so bad for America and so great for Putin that Trump had to unilaterally cancel it. Biden has worked in the interests of Moscow, Beijing and Tehran his entire political career. He'd be one of the biggest traitors to ever serve in the US Senate. But he's a moderate Democrat. And it just turned out, in 1994, Pavel Sudoplatov, a former top KGB officer, wrote a book, and he named Leo Szilard as a fully recruited Soviet agent. And he said that after the war, Szilard had been told to stop his spying, because the FBI was on his case, instead use his political name to advance US nuclear disarmament. The game being, if you could get the US to disarm, the Soviets could either destroy this country or blackmail you into submission. Joe Biden owes his job to 2 Soviet agents, and he has worked for their cause every single step of the way. Every step. Well, we've got some more good news for you. We're in World War III with China right now, and it's playing out right around you, folks, right in your own state. Now, in 2019, I think it was, where Trump put tariffs on Chinese goods, and the Xinhua news agency replied saying, well, in answer to America's aggression, we declare people's war on the United States. And people thought, well, what does that mean? They're going to put tariffs on our goods? And people just ignored the statement. People's war is a term from Mao Zedong. It means to destroy your enemy through unconventional methods before your soldiers even march. So they're marching into a conquered country. People's war is 80,000 American kids dead last year through fentanyl. That's people's war. It's taken brainwashing your kids with TikTok and big tech and Hollywood. That's people's war. It is buying your congressman. Ratcliffe, Trump's intelligence advisor, said last year the Chinese had co-opted so many American congressmen now, not just Democrats, they could determine which legislation passes your Congress and which does not. That should shock every American, folks. It is stealing your technology. It is spying on you. It's stealing your military secrets. It's working through the State Department to give billions of dollars of your arms to the Chinese in Afghanistan. People, do you think that was a mistake? Who's that stupid? That was done to do 3 things. Destroy America's credibility on the world stage, give the Chinese a whole bunch of your weaponry, and give China control of Afghanistan and all the minerals, so now China doesn't have America on its left flank. You know, China's thinking of invading Taiwan, but all the Americans are sitting in Afghanistan. That could be a problem. Now it's not a problem. It changed the whole world balance of power, which is why Putin is playing up with the Ukraine, why Iran's getting ready to march, where China's getting ready to go to war. It's all of it, people. You know, they're getting ready to go to war. American military's been gutted and feminized. The Chinese are getting ready for war. The Russians are getting ready for war. The US Army is getting ready for mascara. And that should scare the heck out of every single one of you, because that is existential, people. So we get hit with the COVID. You know, because obviously biological was a big part of this. Now, we don't know 100% that the Chinese deliberately released the COVID to hurt America. It's only about 99.99999999998% certain right now. But we're 100% sure no, they deliberately spread it. They banned internal air travel, they encouraged it elsewhere. They spread it. Now, there's 3 goals for that, in my opinion. You know, what was Trump's biggest strength at the beginning of 2020?
Economy.
The economy, stupid, right? Well, it didn't help that, did it? So it hurt Trump's chances. He would have been a shoo-in without COVID, no question. And the Chinese knew that if he got a second term, he was going to do to the Chinese Communist Party what Reagan did to the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, only worse. And what a boon that would have been to the world, folks. All that energy, free China, all that entrepreneurship, China freed to contribute to the world rather than be a leech on the world. There's a massive missed opportunity. Hopefully we'll get it back someday. But anyway, so it was designed to hit the economy. It was designed to destroy President Trump. Yeah. Absolutely. But here's the other one. We all need to think about this. Obama gutted the US military. Did massive damage. While he was in charge, the Navy was building 9 ships a year, while China was building 60. He cut weapon systems, he lowered morale, he did massive damage. Massive damage. That's his biggest crime, in my opinion. Of all the damage he did, that was the worst, because that affects our survival. So when Trump got into office, he knew he had to do something, because Russia and China were building up, and America's military was in a bad state, and we were heading for war, and we would lose. So he got rid of the crazy rules of engagement, he stopped the transgender policy, lifted morale, started investing in new weapon systems, Space Force, all of that. All of the things he knew he had to do to keep this country safe. But you can only do that on the back of a strong economy. How do you pay for your military when your economy's in the toilet, folks? And already 31 Democrats, led by Barbara Lee from California, who's been to communist Cuba 22 times that we know about, wrote a letter to the Armed Services Committee demanding massive defense budget cuts and subsequent budget go-rounds because of the COVID damage to the economy. If they can cut your military, and they're already gutting it, folks, if they can seriously cut your military, which country rules the world from then on? It's not hard to figure out, is it? Our military cannot defend us right now. We have to defend our military. We have to do everything we can to keep that military budget going, keep the morale up, keep people in the military if they can stay in there. We have to support our military because our lives depend on it. That's right. So then we get hit with Black Lives Matter rioting, right? We just started to recover. All because George Floyd got killed in Minnesota, right? No. This was organised since at least 2016. Freedom Road Socialist Organisation, a pro-Chinese communist group, their leader, Steph Urick, publicly declared the day Trump was inaugurated that their job was to bring down the presidency by making this country ungovernable. They set up an organisation in 2019, the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, to highlight issues of police brutality against blacks and Latinos. It was all ready to go for election year. They know that on average about 1,100 people die at the hands of the police every year. Almost all of them in completely justifiable circumstances. But they know on the law of averages, you're going to have 100 to 150 black or Latino people in that mix. They tried to start the rioting over the joggers case in Georgia. Didn't work. They tried to start it again when a young black woman was killed in Louisville, Kentucky in a no-knock police raid. Didn't work. George Floyd worked because it was right in their headquarters and it was so darn public. Jess Sundin, I have her on tape, Freedom Road Socialist Organisation, boasting about how she organised the rioting that burnt Minneapolis. She talked of the joy she felt when Precinct 3 was burnt to the ground, and the rioting and looting was an integral part of the movement. The Freedom Road Socialist Organisation burnt Kenosha, it burnt Minneapolis, rioted in Chicago, rioted in Tampa, in Tallahassee, Miami, and one other city here, Jacksonville, right next door to you. Right, they did the writing there. They've got a strong branch there. They did Houston and Dallas. They also did Salt Lake City, Tucson, San Jose, and East LA. The rest of it was organised by the other pro-Chinese Communist Party called Liberation Road. Now, Liberation Road has a front group that some of you may have heard of. They started it in 2015 after Trayvon Martin was killed in this state. It's called Black Lives Matter. Some of you heard of that? That is completely a front of a pro-Chinese Communist Party called Liberation Road. 100%. It is directed out of the Chinese consulate in San Francisco. Alicia Garza, the founder of it, is best friends with Alex Tom. They were student radicals together at UC San Diego in the 90s. He was the head of the Chinese Progressive Association in San Francisco. Big voter registration group that really runs Bay Area politics. He set up Asians for Black Lives. They wrote the Black Lives Matter manual. He came back from China in 2014 and they went straight out to Ferguson, Missouri, where Liberation Road was burning that city to the ground in a trial run for 2020. Straight from China, right to Ferguson. I've got him boasting on tape about how he has a great relationship with the Communist Party of China, that he runs his messaging past the Chinese consulate in San Francisco before he does anything. Chinese operation. The Chinese burnt our cities, people. And nobody's called them out for it. Well, what do you do with all of that energy? Because you've got all these young black and Latino kids and young college students, and they all think Trump's a Nazi and Republicans are racist, and America's a horrible racist country. The only way we can correct that is voting Biden-Harris, right? So, well, this is the argument they were selling them. So, what they did, and Alex Tom set up another group called Seed the Vote. They set up 7 major voting registration groups in 7 key states. Tell me if you recognize them. In Michigan, they had Detroit Action. In Arizona, they had Lucha. In Pennsylvania, they had Pennsylvania Stands Up. In Wisconsin, they had black leaders organizing communities. In Georgia, they had the New Georgia Project. Are any of these states familiar to you folks? All of the key swing states. They went into the inner cities of these states and signed up hundreds of thousands of black and Latino voters to swing those states. I'm not saying they did it. I absolutely believe there was vote fraud. But those voters were supposed to make the vote fraud less obvious. You know, it was a legitimate, you're allowed to sign up voters, just not supposed to do it on behalf of the Communist Chinese, that's all. Now, the model for this was a group called New Virginia Majority. Remember when Virginia was solidly Republican? Then it went blue, and now thanks to Glenn Youngkin and others, it's just gone back. Well, permanently we hope. But this is how they swung it. They set up New Virginia Majority in 2005, set up by Liberation Road, Chinese communists. They had orange t-shirts. They went out into the black, Latino, and immigrant communities and signed up 300,000 minority voters. Then they worked with Terry McAuliffe, the governor of Virginia, and gave voting rights back to 200,000 Florida felons. That 500,000 voting base is what flipped that state. New Virginia Majority wrote an op-ed in the New York Times claiming credit for it. Now, the reason they're so successful is because they were using GIS computer maps, very sophisticated computerized maps. They had every district in Virginia mapped out. I can tell you that the voting patterns, the income levels, and the ethnicity of the voters. So they could send Iranian volunteers into Iranian households. They could send Puerto Rican volunteers into Puerto Rican households. Very sophisticated. And those maps were generated over 10 years on contract by a guy called Steve McClure, a Liberation Road communist and a graduate of the George Mason University Geography Department. He's been writing those maps to flip districts in Virginia and presumably other states for 10 years, working out of the Geography Department of Wuhan University, China. Talk about interference in elections, people. It's going on all of the time. And guess what? New Virginia Majority had a sister organisation. It was called New Florida Majority. Now, I remember back before Ron DeSantis got elected, and I just got to say, I love Ron DeSantis like a chocolate, by the way. Okay? I think he's great. But if I'd say some more about him, I've got to, in the interests of transparency, I've got to reveal a relationship here. Because, see, Ron DeSantis' family comes from Philadelphia. My wife's family comes from Philadelphia. And about 40 years ago, my wife's aunt used to date Ron DeSantis' father's cousin. So, we're practically family. Okay, just so you know. But anyway, so when Gillum was standing, Andrew Gillum was standing, he was on 7% under FBI investigation. Gwen Graham, the daughter of a former Florida governor and a congresswoman in her own right, was also standing for the Democrats, and she was on 23%. And I told an audience in Gainesville that Gillum was going to get the nomination. How did I know? Because I read Liberation Road stuff. They were backing him. They were doing mass voter registration drives amongst the black and Latino communities of all the big cities in Florida. And those people are never polled because they don't normally vote. That's right. So it was not a surprise to me when Andrew Gillum got 34% and Gwen Graham got 31%. And I tell you what, people, they lifted the Democrat vote in this state that year by 40%. That should have been an easy victory. But to his great credit, Trump backed Ron DeSantis instead of Adam Putnam. Putnam would have lost, absolutely. And DeSantis stuck it to Gillum and called him out for the socialist and communist that he was. And he raised the Republican vote by about 41%. Just got a victory. Imagine had Gillum been the governor today.
Oh.
What a nightmare the state would be. It wouldn't be the envy of the country, that's for sure. So, and also that year, so they lost that one. Florida was the only state they lost out of the 7 they contested last year, these communists. And they are still angry about it. I read their stuff and they cannot believe, with all the fraud they did and all the scams they did, they still lost. Because Trump and DeSantis were so popular here, and you guys worked your butts off. That's why they lost. But they are coming back, because in the same year, there was a referendum which gave 1.4 million Florida felons the right to vote. Guess who organised that referendum, folks? Liberation Road. Pro-Chinese communists got that on the ballot, and it passed. And now 1.4 million felons are on the road to voting. So we have got a job in front of us, folks. DeSantis is very popular. A lot of the Democrats are coming down from up north. I used to joke that Trump should have put the border on the wall on the Mason-Dixon line. Okay? But actually, a lot of the Democrats coming from the north are changing registration when they get here. So that's good. But we cannot take this for granted. Ron DeSantis has got to be returned as governor. We've got to elect a whole bunch more Anthony Sabatinis to the legislature. We've got to take over school boards all across the place. So when you get elected to the school board, please throw out the whole curriculum and put a Hillsdale College curriculum in, or a homeschooling curriculum in. Yes. Yeah, that's what you've got to do, sir. And you get the real estate agents to fund it, because they're going to make some money selling houses to people wanting to move in to your school district. But this is what we've got to do. We've got to throw out the whole Marxist curriculum. It ain't just critical race theory. Their wood shop is Marxist people.
Yeah.
Their accounting is Marxist. It's all Marxist.
Yes.
Got to throw the whole lot out, put a proper reading, writing and arithmetic, real American history, real geography. The curriculums are out there. You do your kids a favour.
Yeah.
A massive favour. So, this is where we're at, folks. This is our job. You're in the I-4 corridor here, pretty much. This is the most critical part of the most critical state, of the most critical country, at the most critical time in world history. I'm not trying to put a big responsibility on you, folks, but the future of Western civilization depends on you. Because it does. It actually does. It is that pivotal right now. Now, I just want to say a little bit about this. Now, I hope you get copies of that. That will shock you. That's the Marxist and Islamist in your government. I was brought in to do research on this movie about the Marxists and Islamists in your churches. Your churches are going, who's heard the term woke church? Woke church is Marxist church, people. The communists used to talk about consciousness raising. The Maoists, they talk about, we're going to raise the consciousness of the people. We're going to make people more aware of class issues and issues of race. This was in the Cultural Revolution. Well, now it's woke, where you are made more awoke to issues of race, issues of social inequality. It's still Marxism. It's 100% Marxism, and it's in virtually every Bible college, every seminary in the country now. Anybody was ever involved in Campus Crusade for Christ, for instance, as a young college student? You've probably heard of it though, InterVarsity, Campus Crusade for Christ. They were very conservative, very patriotic Christian organisations, completely woke now. You listen to a Cru Campus Crusade for Christ webinar, they say Jesus at the beginning, they say God at the end, and 2 hours of Maoism in the middle. We've got in the movie, we've got an InterVarsity webinar, an InterVarsity conference was held in 2015 in St. Louis, Missouri. And these are all white kids, pretty much all white kids. It's the Midwest. And they had their keynote speaker was a young pastor from St. Louis, a young black woman called Michelle Higgins. And she got up and grilled them, told them that the thing that God wanted them to do more than anything else is to end white privilege. This was their mission from God. White privilege is pure Marxism. It was invented by Ted Allen and Noel Ignatieff, two Communist Party USA members who went to the Chinese camp. They invented that concept because race is more divisive in America than class. So they decided to get revolution through race rather than class. So these kids being indoctrinated in this, so they think their mission from God is to go out and end white privilege. They might be on food stamps, but they have white privilege over the black football player earning $40 million a year. But this is happening everywhere. They were not told that Michelle Higgins was part of the Organisation for Black Struggle. That is the Front for Liberation Road. She helped burn Ferguson, Missouri to the ground in 2014. So these young kids are learning pure Marxism and thinking it's Christianity. Critical race theory, Marxism. Social justice, Marxism. This is in every major Bible college now. It's in every theological seminary. We name the names. Leading Baptists are involved in this. Leading evangelicals. We trace the history. The first communist front in America was the Methodist Federation for Social Action. They were infiltrating the mainstream churches from the 1920s on. The 1920s, because look, think about this. America was the first country in world history established on the principle that man's rights come from God, not the government. Do you think this might have offended every dictator, every communist, every pharaoh, every baron in the planet? What if my people want their rights? What if they won't accept that I am their Lord, that they want to worship God, not me? And so this country had enemies right from the start. And the communist movement was the worst, because communism is really satanic, and it's all about overthrowing the three institutions we were given to govern us. Overthrowing the church, the family, and civil government.
That's right.
All of those are God-ordained things that keep us happy and safe and prosperous.
Yes.
And if we lose those, which we are, we descend into hell. Hell on earth. The communists can never create heaven on earth, but they sure as heck can create hell. And they want to do it, people. You know, the ultimate motivation for communists is go back to Paradise Lost from Milton. Why did Satan leave heaven? Because he'd rather rule in hell than serve in heaven. That is their motivation, folks. So please get that, take it to your pastor. If your pastor looks at this and says it's a load of garbage and can't answer it, you need to find another church. There's no sense going to a meeting like this. We're putting it out in 20 languages. It's going to go all over the planet. It's 2 hours long. It grips you all the way. It's theological. It's philosophical. It's a crime story. A crime, how the churches have been stolen right from under our noses. Because if they can steal the churches, they can steal the nation. And you look at it from a purely secular point of view. If you're a communist, you know you've got to bring down America to rule the world. You know you've got to do that. And you know you can't do it from the outside, or not then anyway. And you know that the backbone of America is the church. So wouldn't you want to be inside the churches? Using their respectability and their money and their influence to promote socialism. And they've been doing that for 80 years. And they got all the mainstream churches, but they didn't have the evangelicals and the Baptists. And these are the crazy people who went out and voted for Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump. Do you think that might have annoyed the socialists just a little bit? So they set up the Gospel Coalition in 2005 under Tim Keller, very well-known Christian, to bring Marxism into the churches. They got inside the Southern Baptists. Al Mohler turned a blind eye to this. Under J.D. Greer and Russell Moore, they were bringing pure Marxism into the Baptist church.
Yes, they did.
Pure Marxism. And it's destroying the churches. One example of this. In our movie, we quote an example of First Baptist Church in Naples, Florida, near where I live. That's a county that went 92% for Trump. So this is conservative, right? Well, they had 17 people started that church. They grew it to 2,000. Their pastor retired. They needed a new pastor. So the Southern Baptists sent them this young, black, woke pastor called Marcus Hayes. Left wing as you can get in a super conservative area. And the Baptists have to vote 85% to confirm a new pastor. And he only got 82%. He didn't get the job. So the Southern Baptists said, that's because you're a racist congregation. This is a racist church. They mounted a big campaign. They staged a coup inside the church, and the 17 founders were thrown out of their own church on accusations of racism. This is what is happening. Marcus Hayes didn't get the job, but he went to a church in Dallas. Now I'm getting emails from people at that church how they have to leave that church because he's wrecking that one now. So people, I'm serious here. We think of the churches as our last bastion. And they can be. But we have to strengthen the remnant because the majority of the church is falling to apostasy and socialism, and it cannot be relied on. Why are the churches doing nothing when our cities are being burned, when an election is stolen, when the country's falling into moral depravity? They do nothing. Why? Because they're infiltrated. They're actually pushing this stuff in a lot of instances. So please, get that. So what I'm saying is this, folks. We're in a power of grief, but the first step in any solution is face reality, confront the truth. There's a lot of power in faith, a lot of spiritual power in facing things as they are, because that's when you start to do something. See, we have free will. God is not going to reach down and save this country. But what God can do is when we decide to save this country, He can help. He can get It's like your founding fathers. They fought a war over religious liberty. They were beaten across every state. They were destroyed. They were fighting the world's greatest military armed with squirrel rifles. And they lost almost every battle. They were on the verge of surrender. On the verge of destruction. But they had decided to fight. Yes. They had committed to fighting. They had put everything into it. And then the miracles happened. George Washington went down to Valley Forge. He got down on his knees and he prayed, and he went down to Yorktown and led that ragtag army to take out King George's army and win the war. There's numerous miracles in that war, folks. Numerous miracles, but you've got to fight to get the miracles. We have a majority in this country, folks. We got 80 million Trump voters. 30 million more who wish they had been Trump voters. And God. That's a big majority. But we have to do our bit, and we all know that even though these people are out there, we know most of the work is going to be done by a small minority. That's always been the way it is. You look, Gideon's army versus the horde, David versus Goliath, the American revolutionaries versus King George's army. It's never been God raising a big army to smite a small army. It's always been God raising a small army to smite a huge army. It's always been the courageous and committed few that make the difference. And I believe the greatest victories come from the darkest times. Because that is when people decide which side of the fence they're actually on. Are you with good? Are you with evil? There's no more sitting on the fence now, folks. So that's when the power of God can come through, because good people are willing to stand up. Good people are willing to be brave and faithful and courageous and fight. That's when we get help, folks. Amen. And we are at that time now. This is our time of testing. Your ancestors fought the War of Independence. Your uncles, your grandfathers went out into the Pacific and fought malaria and fought the Japanese and island hopped at great cost for years at a time. 18-year-old uncles came off a farm in Iowa or Indiana or from driving a taxi in New York and put on a uniform and stormed the beaches at Normandy and fought the Battle of the Rose. So we do not have the right to take this easy. They sacrificed and laid down their lives so that we could be free. So your country could be free and my country could be free. If you love your children and your grandchildren, now is the time to prove how much you love them. Now is the time to prove how much you honour your God by standing up for what is right, no matter what the cost. Am I right, people? I know what you do, folks. You're always writing out checks. You're always going to meetings. You're knocking on doors and putting up yard signs. You do it year in, year out for two reasons. Am I right? Because you love your kids and you love your country? Yes. Is that why you do it? Yes. Well, now's the time to double down, folks. I know it ain't easy, but it's a lot easier than storming the beach at Normandy, I'll tell you that. That's right. A lot easier. So, We've got a special mission in this room, folks, because as I said, you've got to protect Ron DeSantis. You've got to elect this gentleman to the scoreboard, this gentleman to the state rep. I love what you had to say about Southern California. I know the history there, and I love what you have to say, sir. No compromise. You're not there to compromise with evil. So I don't know how it's going to go, folks. All I know is this. If we do nothing with this great opportunity we have been given, we will deliver our country, our children into slavery, and we'll be cursed forever.
Yeah, that's right.
But if we stand up and fight with everything that we have for our God, our country, and our kids, if we sweat blood for what we believe in, possibly we may still lose. Possibly. But at least all of us will earn the right to look our children in the eye and say, I did everything I possibly could for you. What is that worth to you, folks? And when the time of account comes, all of us can stand up straight and say, I was a good and faithful servant.
Yes, amen.
What is that worth to you? And if we win, people, and we absolutely can win this, that 2016 election convinced me that God is not finished with this country yet, folks.
That's right.
We win this, we'll spark an economic boom like we've never seen. We'll spark a liberty revolution, not just here, but all over the world. And we'll set the stage for a much-needed religious revival.
Yes.
And all of us will earn the right to pass on to our children not just the amazing country that you inherited and I came to, but one that's even greater. Is the chance of that worth a little risk and work, people? So thank you so much for what you do for America, for my country, for Great Britain, for every great country that yearns for freedom in this world. Thank you. So God bless America, God bless Florida, and the Liberty Republicans. God bless every single one of you. Thanks so much.